As you may or may not know, my wife and I just got back from Vegas. It was a great trip. We ate, we drank, we had a blast. But then we got home and looked at the credit card, and I gotta say, it doesn't matter how much fun you're having, $25 for a drink is a ripoff. Frickin' Vegas. I hate getting ripped off, and so do the lads over at Harry's. They spent years watching the razor blade companies rip people off and said, no more. Not all heroes wear capes, my friends, and they want to prove that they're legit by offering you hot dogs a $13 trial set for just $3 at harrys.com/RTG. I've been telling you about them for months, and I'm genuinely proud to have Harry's as a sponsor of this show. I wasn't kidding. The plastic, futuristic-looking crap razors you get at the store are overpriced and they're poor quality. Harry's blades are crisp, clean, and classy. They're the kind of razor you'd expect your grandpa to have on his bathroom counter. And most importantly, they work. Shave after shave, they're so smooth, they're precise. I used to go through the crappy store blades all the time, but Harry's are built to last. And they're not just better quality than the other names, they're more affordable. And they deliver. Just set your schedule, and for as little as $2, new blades, shaving creams, lotions, everything you need, right to your door when you need it. I genuinely cannot think of a reason not to try Harry's. And I'm not just saying this because they're sponsors. They're the best shaving supplies I've ever used. Try them out, and if you're not happy, your shave's on them. And unlike the other subscriptions, they're really easy to cancel if you want to too, which is a nice bonus, but believe me, you're not going to want to cancel. Getting ripped off isn't funny. Switch to Harry's. Get started with a $13 trial set for just $3 at harrys.com/RTG. That's harrys.com/RTG for a $3 trial set. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Remember the Game. It is my retro gaming podcast where every week a buddy of mine and I sit down and we geek out about the games we played back in the day. My name is Adam Blank. Thank you so much for listening to the show. And this week it is episode 194, and we're going way back to 1989 and talking about a game that's probably older than a sizable portion of the listeners that we have here at Remember the Game Industries. We're talking Dragon Warrior for the NES, which you may know as Dragon Quest, because that's what the series goes by these days. If you've ever played Dragon Quest 8, Dragon Quest 11, Dragon Quest Builders, anything Dragon Quest, this is where it all started. And if you're new to my podcast, we don't do a ton of history lessons around here. I don't claim to be a walking encyclopedia of video game knowledge or anything like that. But this game, Dragon Warrior, is one of the forefathers of the JRPG. I don't know if it's the first one or anything. It probably isn't, but it is up there. This is a trailblazer, and it is very, very, very basic. And that's why I love it. And I shouldn't love this game, really. I could take or leave JRPGs as a whole. I like my JRPGs to have a good story, which this doesn't have. I hate when they have random encounters, which this game does have. It's grindy as all fuck. That's really all you do in this game is grind. It can be confusing without a walkthrough on where you're supposed to go. You're almost certainly going to get killed at some point and lose a bunch of progress. If you play it on the original NES, you can't just save anywhere you want. This game should be taking Echo the Dolphin levels of shit from me. But you know what? It doesn't. It isn't. It won't. It's not going to. There's no Angry Adam this week. I played this game as a kid, and there's just something about it that clicks with me. Deep in my soul, I have a connection to this game. I fucking love it. It is also the only Dragon Quest game I have ever played, so don't yell at me if I have no idea what's in future Dragon Quest games or anything like that. My guest this week returning to the show is my good buddy, the gentleman of Remember the Game Industries and fellow comedian, fellow podcaster, my buddy David Ray. You may remember him from episodes like Duck Hunt and Shining Force, and he experienced Dragon Warrior for the first time getting ready for this episode. And while he doesn't love it like I love it, we can both agree that it's just beautiful in its simplicity. There's something about it. And we're going to get there in just a minute, because speaking of simple things that are oddly beautiful, it's time for yet another edition of the Remember the Game infamous intro. Dun, 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 dun. And if you're new to the podcast, welcome aboard. Consider this your warning. Our intros are a little long. They're kind of beefy, but they're fun. Our intros are like the very first part of Dragon Warrior, where nothing's really going to kill you, and you're just hammering slimes and banking gold. That's the early part of the show, minus the gold, but extra slime. And if you do want to skip the intro, go about 30 minutes from now, and you'll get into the conversation. But hang around. We talk video games and stuff. It's fun. I got to get my plug out of the way. I'll get it done once, it's done. We have merchandise, hoodies, t-shirts, coffee mugs, all kinds of stuff, posters, rocking badass art. All of our merch was designed by my man Joe. You can check him out at 4545creative.com, and you can check out our merchandise at rememberthegamepodcast.com if you're interested. It is a great way to support the little guy here at Remember the Game Industries. And if you're like, meh, close, not for me, I'm a naked person myself, well, then you can always just consider throwing us the change out of your couch over on Patreon, because for just $2 a month, you get 2 extra podcasts every week, every Thursday and every Friday, additional podcasts. You'll get exclusive access to my gaming news show, Game Patch, every Friday morning, where I look at all the biggest news from the last week in the world of modern video games. I add in my opinions and some profanity and stuff. And then Expansion Pass goes live every Thursday, and it's a different podcast every week. We do rankings, we look back at characters, we talk about consoles, we do some comedy episodes. There's video game reviews in there. This past week on Expansion Pass, I did just that. I dropped my spoiler-free review of Horizon Forbidden West. It might have been my most anticipated game of 2022 coming into the year. Top 3 for sure. I spent a ton of time with it. I've rolled the credits, and I'm finally ready to tell you if it lived up to my lofty expectations. And as is becoming tradition during the intro here, this is a sneak peek of last week's episode of Expansion Pass, my spoiler-free Horizon Forbidden West review. Most of your missions in this game come down to combat. You either have to go fight humans, from a different tribe or whatever, or you've got to go fight these fucking giant robot dinosaurs. And despite the amount of variety when it comes to different weapons and different strategies and stuff, it does start to get a little bit repetitive, I think, which is the same way I felt with the first one. I went from like, I got to fight every fucking dinosaur I find, because when you kill them, you can strip them down for parts that you can use to upgrade equipment and stuff like that. And I went from like, I got to kill every robot I find, to being like, oh, that's a new robot that I've never seen before, I'll kill that one, to being like, fuck it, I'm just going to sneak around these people and not fight any of them. By the end of the game, I wasn't fighting anybody that I didn't have to, because I was just bored of fighting. And it's really fun. It just makes you do a lot of it. And I did start to get bored of it by the end. It does start to feel very, very repetitive. So that's now available to all of our Patreons over in our archives. And this week for Expansion Pass number 107, I'm going right back to the review well and talking about the new Sonic movie, Sonic the Hedgehog 2. I liked the first one quite a bit for what it was. I like Knuckles. This movie is setting the box office on fire, and that's all great, but is the movie any good? We'll have a listen to Expansion Pass tomorrow and find out. That review will be spoiler-free as well. All of my modern reviews are spoiler-free, and then I tack a short spoiler cast on at the end, but I warn you like a million times before the spoilers start, so you're safe anytime you want to listen to one of my modern reviews. So that'll be going live tomorrow for all of our Patreons. Again, $2 gets you 2 extra podcasts a week, plus instant access to about 200 archived podcasts, plus access to our Remember the Game Discord. You get the chance to vote on our Patreon poll at the beginning of every month. You get the ability to submit comments to be read on all of our shows, including Playing Play 1, Remake 1, Erase 1, and you get a shout out, and you get to hear me mispronounce your name like I'm about to do to most of these people. And I am gonna fuck some of these names up. But a huge thank you to all of our newest Patreons. Jason McGovern, nailed it. Brad Blair, got it. Professor White T, nailed it. Esteban Navarro, think I got that one. Joey Wilshinsky, that's where shit went off the rails. Sorry, Joey. Rhinoxide, Rui Palma, Catch, Catch, I like that one. Eric Rivera, Jim, Frederick Lindstrom, Josh Stone, Bryce Larson, Gerdinator 19, Jay Swanee 41, Brent Scott, Mailer 07, Chris Williams, Dan Page, Oroku Saki's Gardener, love that, Matthew Taylor, Jeremy Savage, Trademark 101, and Adam Pucky. I hope I didn't fuck up too many of your names, but thank you all so much and welcome to Remember the Game Industries. And to wrap up my sales pitch, the only time I'm going to plug it to the end of the episode, 5% of our Patreon income every month gets donated to our Remember the Children 24-hour charity stream at the end of the year. That money's going to go to the Stollery Children's Hospital here in Edmonton. So not only are you supporting the little independent content creator, getting a ton of extra content, you're throwing a little money at the kids too. We're at $700 or so already being donated, and we're 4 months into the year. So things are going great over there. Patreon.com/remember the game. Thank you so much. And if you're interested, you can find me on Twitch, twitch.tv/remember the game. I never bug you for subs or anything. I just play video games over there, and you can come by and see my dumb nose, and we'll be friends. So twitch.tv/member the game if you're interested. That's enough blowing myself. Let's blow some cartridges by blowing some of you. It is our opening segment here on the show. I read a few comments and questions from our patrons, usually gaming related, but not always. And we call this segment Blowing in the Cartridge.
He blows all right. He blows big time.
That's it, honey. Get into the spirit.
Let's blow. And listen, before I get to our first blower this week, I just have to take a quick moment to blow myself and thank all of you for giving me the opportunity to do it. According to the website Chartable, which from how I've read and understood is fairly accurate in its rankings, Remember the Game was officially, for the first time ever over the Easter weekend, the #1 most downloaded, most listened to video game podcast in Canada over on Apple Podcasts. We've got to about 15th in the US before. I think we've cracked 8th over in the UK, but we were the #1 video game podcast in Canada. And as a Canadian myself, I am so fucking proud of that. No one can take that away from me. When I eventually get canceled, and I'm sure I will someday, I can be like, at one time I hosted the #1 video game podcast in the country. And that's fucking awesome. So just from the bottom of my big, fat, sweaty heart, thank you all so much for making that happen. I really, really appreciate it. Okay? Thank you. Let's blow. Our first blower this week is Hall of Famer LP Cole, who wrote in and said, "Hey, Mr. Blank, for someone new to Game Pass, what are your top 3 non-sport game suggestions? Cheers and keep up the good work." Cole, I would definitely recommend trying the Halo and Gears series if you haven't. I'm not going to use those as my top 3 picks. I just feel like that's basically Xbox's Mario and Zelda. Or what would be the PlayStation equivalent of those now? What are the top 2 PlayStation IPs? I know someone's going to be like, Pokemon is actually a top 2 for it. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Definitely try Halo and Gears. But those aside, my top 3 picks on Game Pass that aren't sports games off the top of my head, Slay the Spire, the unofficial official game of Remember the Game Industries. We're going to talk about that game more in just a second. It is a semi-roguelike card combat game that I don't like card games where I have to build a deck and constantly tweak the deck and stuff. You get a brand new deck every time you play it. It is one of my favorite video games of all time. I'm also going to shout out Hollow Knight, which might be the best Metroidvania that I've ever played. It was my game of the year a few years ago, and that is over on Game Pass. And I was going to go with Doom Eternal, but I'm going to shout out Hades because I think everybody knows Doom. Not everybody knows Hades. Hades is a roguelike, isometric, like hack and slash action game that is just fucking superb. So Hollow Knight, Slay the Spire, and Hades. Those will be my 3 for anyone wondering what I would recommend off Game Pass. There you go. Thanks for writing in, Cole. Good luck and enjoy Game Pass, buddy. Speaking of Slay the Spire, Doogie wrote into us and said, "You son of a bitch. I mean this in both a positive and a negative way. Over all the episodes I've listened to, I've heard you talk about Slay the Spire many times, but I never really had a desire to play it because it didn't seem like a game that would interest me. A couple episodes ago on the Sonic episode, I heard you discussing it again and that it was available for free on PS Plus this month." It still is, by the way, if you're listening to this in April. So I figured, what the hell, and I downloaded it. I've now sunk 25 hours into this game in about a week. I can't stop playing it. It's so addictive, so fun, and also just so infuriating at the same time. This hot dog cannot get enough. I know I started this note off being a little blunt, but seriously, thank you for talking about this game. This is why I love your podcast, because I get to geek out on all the games we grew up playing, but it's also introduced me to many games I've never tried, and those even in genres I've never thought about. Keep rocking that mic and turning out these awesome episodes. Well, thank you, Doogie. And yes, I am just going to take one more. Listen, I'm not sponsored by them. I don't get 1 red cent from the sales of Slay the Spire, but I've probably sold 100 copies of that fucking game at this point. It is available on everything. It is on Game Pass. It is a free game on PS Plus this month. It is a card combat game. You just heard me explain it to Cole. You don't have to build a deck. It is one of my girlfriend has put about 1 trillion hours into it on her iPad now. She can't stop playing it. It's one of my favorite games of all time. It is so good. For the love of Christ, try Slay the Spire if you've got access to it, please. And you can thank me fucking later. In non-Slay the Spire stories, Old Man Jim wrote in and said, I recently got myself a PS5, finally. I didn't get it through a retailer, but through someone online. It came with Ratchet & Clank, and don't worry, I actually got it for a great deal, no scalper prices. And I gotta say, it's such an amazing system, and the controller is out of this world. It fits in my hand, and it feels incredible. It's gotta be in my top 3 favorite controllers of all time, GameCube, Xbox 360, and PS5. Yeah, I like that comment because it's nice to hear that somebody's persistence paid off and they finally got their hands on a PS5. And I just finished playing Horizon Forbidden West on my PS5, and I just want to give it a shout out to that controller as well. I play PlayStation the least of my big 3 consoles, and I'm not shitting on PlayStation or anything. I like Nintendo, and then usually if something's on 2 consoles, I'll play it on Xbox. But the PS5's DualSense controller is simply spectacular. It might just be the greatest video game controller of all time. It might be. And I don't want anyone coming in here being like, what about the fucking GameCube? The GameCube's a great controller. I love the Xbox controller as a whole. I actually have loved every PlayStation controller. I thought the PS4 controller in particular was great, but the PS5 controller is the PS4 controller on fucking steroids. The only thing that I don't like as much about the PS5 controller is I prefer the offset analogs like you find on like an Xbox controller, as opposed to putting them side by side at the bottom. I prefer mine one high, one low, but that's just nitpicking. It is such a great controller. So I agree with you, Old Man Jim, and I'm glad you're digging your PS5, buddy. Congrats on finally getting one. That's awesome. Dark White 73 wrote in and said, hey, Adam, as a Turtles fan, have you watched Batman versus the TMNT? A buddy of mine showed it to me, and I found it very entertaining. I really enjoyed this movie's portrayals of Batman, his allies, and the Shredder with his design pulled straight from the 80s cartoon, but by far the best part of this movie was the Turtles. While I normally get a hard-on for Jerk Raph, especially in the 03 cartoon, I felt Michelangelo stole the show with his audience-standing character personality. While there are some parts you might find annoying or confusing, it's definitely a must-watch for any Batman or Turtles fan. Yes, I have seen it. I actually bought it the day it came out. I bought it on iTunes or whatever the fuck it was. Cartoon, if you've never seen it, it's animated. I've probably watched it half a dozen times. It's really good. And I agree, actually. Michelangelo, who I like Mikey. He's my second favorite turtle, but I've always felt that he's the least, he has the least depth of the 4 of them. And he brought the heat in Batman versus the TMNT. I thought he stole the show. I agree 1,000,000%. I thought he was fucking excellent in that movie. So yeah, if you're a fan of Ninja Turtles or Batman, check out Batman versus TMNT. It's really fucking good. Also, Dark White, shout out to Raph in the 03 cartoon. The 03 cartoon is the best cartoon of the 4. And I really like 2012, but 03 is the best cartoon of the 4. And Raph is excellent in that series. I agree. Fucking Raph. Thank you for writing in, buddy. Mitch Mellett wrote in and said, got into this podcast to find out more about what games to buy for my recently acquired NES, SNES, and Nintendo 64, but I found out afterwards about your comedy career, which is really cool. I have a few comedians whose podcasts I listen to, but I'm from Indianapolis. Do you have any not-so-local comedians you really like? And if so, do you notice any difference between comedy scenes in different countries? Do you find yourself listening locally more than anything else? So I have kind of talked about this before, but it's been a while. In case you're new to the show and you don't know, I am a professional comedian. I say that in air quotes because I pay my bills with comedy, but I don't consider myself a professional. But I am a touring, working professional stand-up comedian from Edmonton, Canada. And truth be told, Mitch, I don't listen to a lot of stand-up at all. I only watch a couple specials a year. I don't really listen to their podcasts. I don't know why. I don't know if it's because I just feel like I already do that so much with my time that I don't dedicate more time to it. Part of me is afraid of accidentally lifting a joke off of somebody else's, listening to I used to listen to Bill Burr's podcast all the time, but that dude riffs on everything. And I'm afraid that something will stick in my brain and I'll end up lifting it and using it as a joke and then finding out I stole it from Bill Burr. So I don't listen to very many. You did ask, do I notice any differences between comedy scenes? I've only ever performed in Canada. I'm actually not allowed to perform in the U.S. without a work visa because I do get asked that a lot if I'm ever come to the States. I'm not allowed to. One thing that I have noticed, as far as I can tell, comedians from Europe, like over in the UK, are a lot more dry. than comedians here. That seems to be the big difference. I don't see there being too much of a difference between Canadian comedians and American comics, other than obviously, you know, the topical stuff. We talk about our monopoly money and our legalized pot and, you know, hockey, and Canadian comics or American comics talk about, I don't know, American stuff, Donald Trump and what the fuck? I don't know what the fuck you guys, I don't know, whatever, they talk about American stuff. So I do see that, but I have found that, European comedians, some of them are a little bit, not stuck up. I don't mean it to sound like they're stuck up. They're just much more, very dry. And I like that. I appreciate that humor. But that's really all I've noticed. I'm a very unknowledgeable comedian as far as pro comics go. So I'm sorry if that was kind of a weak answer, but thank you for writing in, Mitch. A couple more here. We'll wrap the segment up. Chris Pynchon wrote in and said, "Hey, dude, let's talk about Canadian beer. As an American, prior to moving to Canada, I had an image in my head that Canadians were proud beer drinkers and had amazing beers to share with the world. Then I moved here. I get presented with Kokanee, Pilsner, Molson Canadian, and various others that have left me very disappointed in the state of Canadian beer. The only ones I don't mind are Alexander Keith's, Rickards, and surprisingly AGD. Do I have a misguided understanding of Canadian beers, or is my palate just so sophisticated that I can't drink what mere mortals drink? Truth be told, I don't drink a ton of beer. Chris, I'm a whiskey guy myself, but I used to drink beer, and I agree, dude. Most of the big name brands like Molson Canadian, Pilsner, Kokanee, I think they fucking suck. Quite frankly, I think they suck even more in the South, in the U.S. Like, I go down there and some of your beer's like 4%. And I'm like, how the fuck you guys even drink this? It's goddamn water. Alexander Keith's isn't terrible. The only big name brand beer I drink with any regularity these days is MGD, Miller Genuine Draft. Otherwise, I know I'm going to sound like a fucking hippie with a scarf and a fucking charcuterie board under his arm, but like, I don't think our mainline beers are much better than America's. Venture off the beaten path, get creative, and try out some local brews. Local breweries are the best beers you're gonna find. I'm telling you, it's fucking night and day. Night and day. Doesn't matter where you are in the country, there's probably a local brewery making some of the best. It's all I really drink anymore. I don't buy the big name beers hardly at all anymore. I would rather buy, you know, some IPAs or some local wobbly pops and go there. So don't judge us on Molson Canadian. That shit's garbage. Fucking drink some craft beer and thank me later that you did. It's worth the extra money. Plus it gets up to like 6, 7, 8, 9%. And that's the good stuff. Thanks for writing in, buddy. Deli16 said, "Hey, Mr. Blank, my question is, if you could be amazing at playing any type of video game, which would you pick? Would it be a shooter and you'd be a Call of Duty legend, or maybe be one of the best fighting game players of all time, or, you know, whatever tickles your fancy?" Honestly, Deli, it'd be fighting games. No, I didn't even really think about it. If I could instantly be amazing, like top level quality at any fighting or at any type of video game, it'd be fighting games. Because I am beyond scrub bottom level quality, and I admire the way good fighting game players play their fighting games. So I would instantly just be like world-class fighting game. Oh, that'd be so much cooler than being good at fucking Mario Kart. Anyway, thanks, Deli. Finally, before we move on, it's letter time. Michael Matthews wrote in and said, "Hey, Adam, I love this podcast and it's totally yours to take in any direction you would like. However, I'm extra glad this week to see you going back to actual old school gaming. This, alongside the Sonic the Hedgehog and Gunsmoke episodes, have been the ones that I've looked forward to the most amid the rush of largely mid-2000s games lately. Again, I'm a huge fan of the podcast. This is all constructive criticism and me just stating the truly retro games are what keep me coming back." Thanks, Michael, for sharing that. So for anyone that's newer to the show, it was a very hot topic around here for a long time, whether or not we were ever going to cover the occasional PS3, Xbox 360, Wii game. And I don't even cover a ton of Xbox, GameCube, PS2 games. And the reason for that is because I kind of got out of gaming in the early 2000s. I was in my young 20s. I was going to the bars. I missed a lot of PS2 games in particular. So the reason we've been churning out more of those is because those are the games I'm trying to spend more time playing that I've never played before to get caught up, because I know they're popular and people have been requesting them and I want to fill those voids. The other thing that I have to keep in mind myself sometimes, and I mentioned this right off the top, some of our listeners, the PS2 is their NES. You know, they grew up with an Xbox like some of us grew up with a Sega Genesis, right? Like, you could be, dude, if you're like, if we're in the year 2022, so if you were born, say you were born in 1998, you're 24 this year, but you were like, if you were a 1998 kid, then in like 2004, you were like 5-6 years old. That's when I had my NES. So if you had a PS2, then to you, you're as nostalgic for the PS2 than I am for the NES. So I've really opened my mind to that, and I'm really trying to walk the line. And there are going to be weeks like this where we go back to the NES, the original Sega Genesis, stuff like that. There are going to be weeks where we do more Xbox 360 and PS3 games. I really am trying to cover all bases. So if there's a system or something that you've been like, dude, do more of those games, do more of the old ones, do more of the new ones, I promise you, I'm trying to do all of them, because at the end of the day, they're all retro to somebody, right? Like, I've always said, to me, the definition of a retro game is something you played in high school or further back. Once you get to be, late 20s, early 30s, or older than that. So anyway, thank you, Michael, for the feedback. I appreciate it, buddy. Thank you for listening, and thank you to all of you for the submissions. I appreciate it, but we got to keep this train rolling. So let's switch things up, and let's get into our Smash Hit segment, the official game show of Remember the Game Industries Play 1, Remake 1, Erase 1. And a huge thank you to Classic Concentration from the NES for unknowingly providing us with the theme music for the show. The rules are simple. Every week, I give our patrons 3 retro video games. They can play one as it was released, remake one as a modern game, and the third game is erased from time forever. And as always, there are no wrong answers, but there is a right one. We'll get there in just a minute. And this week, I figured we're talking an NES RPG and Dragon Warrior, so I went with 3 more of them, albeit not tried and true JRPGs. We got Willow, we got Star Tropics, and we got Crystalis. I don't know how you pronounce that. I'm going with Crystalis. That's how I'm going to say it. 35% of you voted to play Crystalis, remake Star Tropics, and erase Willow. And I almost went that way myself. Very close, and then I decided to go to different orders. Let's see what a few of you have to say here, and then I'll tell you what the right answer was. Cheesehead West wrote in and said, play Crystalis. I never played it before, so why not play it? Remake Star Tropics, the only one of these 3 I have played, so I'll remake it into a triangle strategy / Octopath Traveler start of art style, and then erase Willow. Movie games usually suck, and that box art makes me want to punt a raccoon. So it gets erased. That's fun. I don't understand the hate of the raccoon. I don't even think it's that bad a box art. There's way worse box art on the NES than fucking Willow. Look at Mega, and I love Mega Man, but that original box art is P.U. Willow. Wow, okay. Erasing Willow because of the box art. Fair enough. Gernardinator 19, not the first Gernardinator, the 19th, wrote in and said, I'd play Willow because it was an awesome game. It was an awesome game. Remake Star Tropics as it deserves a remake, and erase Crystalis as I never played it, and based off the gameplay, it looks very meh. All right, I can live with that logic, and I appreciate that you said Willow is awesome, because Willow, I didn't play a lot of Willow, but I do remember thinking Willow was awesome as well. Jason Bedeneski wrote in and said, play Star Tropics. It's a great game for the NES platform, and it's fun for people to get into retro gaming. Remake Crystalis. I haven't played it before, but it looks like its story and art design from the Miyazaki film Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind. You're on fucking double secret probation for fucking putting that in there, Jason. You know goddamn well that I can't say that word, Nausicaa, but it's got 2 A's and the second A has the 2 dots on top. So what is that? Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind. Fuck. I'm not even finishing your fucking comment. You said erase Willow because you stayed up till 5 a.m. trying to beat it. Well, now you're going to stay up till 5 a.m. trying to figure out how to get off double secret probation in my fucking book. Throwing a goddamn word like Nausicaa into my fucking... Oh, I didn't notice that when I fucking picked your comment, or you would have... Whoa. Double secret probation. Blindy from the Optional Boss podcast said, play Crystalis because I haven't, even though I own it, and it's always been brought up within my group of friends. I'd remake Star Tropics. Just an update is fine. Keep it 2D, change it to 16-bit, adjust the controls and difficulty accordingly. I love it. And erase Willow. Sad that it's Capcom, and Capcom usually delivers on quality, especially back in the day, but I just haven't heard of it. And I can't erase Star Tropics, and I really want to play Crystalis. You've never heard of Willow? Man, that's wild. I can't believe how many people are throwing shade at Willow. And like, I'm not going to sit here and die on the hill of Willow, but it's a good fucking game, man. People need to show a little bit of love. Shawsome One knows what's up. This one is easy for me. I'd play Willow because it was my first ever RPG and I love it to death. I'd remake Star Tropics. This game is definitely slept on and it's in my book as a top tier classic. And a remake for this game is well worth it and deserved. And I'd erase Crystalis. This game just didn't appeal to me at all. Fair enough. Dude, everybody loves Star Tropics. You're not seeing a lot of Star Tropics hate around here, which I like. And Bryce Larson wrote in and said, first time playing as a new Patreon. For the record, you're not always going to get read when you put that in there, but I feel like some of you have figured out that if you put that, oh, it's first time, you're probably going to get my fucking attention. And that worked flawlessly, Bryce Larson. Well played. Bryce said, first time playing as a new Patreon, and thank God this one is easy. Play Star Tropics, since to this day, it is a top 3 NES game for me. The dungeons are super fun and not nearly as frustrating as some of its other console brethren. In today's age, the story would probably feel played out with every other game involving alien conspiracies, however. Remake Willow, mainly because, if anything, it calls back to the story's welcome and the prospect of getting anything else film or game-wise is saucy as fuck. And erase Crystalis because I played it far too late and I've never been able to get into it. I like the Star Tropics love. I don't know if I would say that their dungeons aren't nearly as frustrating as some other ones because the end of that game is fucked, but I do like Star Tropics. A whopping 13% of you went the same way I did this week, including High Plains Drifter, who said, play Crystalis. I have great memories of that game. I'm going to remake Willow. That movie holds a lot of member berries for me, and that Princess Bride VHS pretty much got wore out at our house. And then erase Star Tropics. I just flat out hate that game. Big whoop, want to fight about it? In a perfect harmonious world, we'd all just play Echo the Dolphin all day, every day. I'll go see myself to double secret probation. Yeah, you fucking will, High Plains, you fucking drifted sack of shit. But I would go in the same order, very reluctantly. And before all of you yell at me for erasing Star Tropics, listen to the logic. I'm going to play Crystalis because I haven't. You all know I don't like to erase games I've never played. And I actually think it looks a little bit like an 8-bit Link to the Past. I love top-down action RPGs. It looks right up my alley. I would like to play it. And then I'm going to remake Willow. And I struggled for a good 5 minutes on this between remaking Willow and Star Tropics. And it's just, everybody hates on Willow. And I really liked that game when I was a kid. And maybe it sucks and I don't remember it properly because I haven't played it in a long time. It's just then I got to erase Star Trop. You know what? For the first time ever, I'm going to change my order. I'm going to go with the majority. I'm going to remake Star Tropics just because I can't bring myself to erase that fucking game. All I would do in a remake is make the end of it less obnoxiously difficult because fuck the spaceship. And I'm going to erase Willow. And I don't want to. It's just you're not Star Tropics. First time I've ever done that. I'm changing the order that I wrote in my notes. Play Crystalis, remake Star Tropics. I'm sorry, Willow, because I like you, but you're not Star Tropics. Once I play Crystalis, then maybe I'll erase it and keep Willow. But anyway, there you go. Thank you to everyone that played. What have I been up to over the last 7 days? And then we'll get into talking Dragon Warrior. I've been playing Final Fantasy Tactics, getting ready for episode 200. I'm keeping my cards very close to the chest, so I'm not telling you anything. I've also been playing a ton of Kirby and the Forgotten Land. I'll be dropping a review on that in Expansion Pass in another week or so. I'm impressed, man. I'm not a big Kirby fan, but Kirby and the Forgotten Land is really fucking good. So I've been blown away by it. And then I've also been playing Castle of Illusion starring Mickey Mouse on the Sega Genesis as it won this month's Patreon poll. So I'm playing it, getting ready for the show. I think it's good, not quite great, but I think it's good. Definitely better than some of the other platformers I've played in that era. But anyway, I'll save more of that for the show as well. It's good. It's very averagely, maybe slightly above averagely good. Anyway, let's talk Dragon Warrior, which is way better than slightly averagely good, because that's why you're all here. I like to give our listeners a few chances to share their memories of the game before my guests and I hog the mic. Ninja Lunchbox wrote in and said, my first taste of an RPG. I was probably a little too young to actually get through the game, but a few years later I went back to it and enjoyed it. Dragon Warrior and the first Final Fantasy will always have a place in my retro library. And as you're about to hear, those two games, Dragon Warrior and Final Fantasy, are going to be attached to the hip forever. David and I couldn't get away from talking about the both of them. You're about to hear that. Raul wrote in and said, I've recently started going through the Dragon Quest games. I beat this first one fairly recently and I loved it. I grew up with these old school JRPGs, so I didn't mind grinding my way through it. It's such a charming series and it does a good job of making you feel like you're on an adventure. I'm on to part 4 now and I'm excited to continue checking my way through these games. I gotta play more of these at some point because I always take shit that I've only ever played the first one. Michael Cates. We have Daryl Cates here in the city. It's spelled the same way, so you're getting pronounced Cates. Michael Cates wrote in and said, as a kid, I could not beat this game. I didn't understand the concept of grinding, and I got fed up with wandering into areas and getting absolutely bushwhacked by some smiling bat monster. After getting a few RPGs under my belt, I went back to this game, and I really loved it. It's a bit grindy, but it's really enjoyable. I really remember the thrill of killing monsters that used to just stomp my ass into the ground before. That's what the whole game is about, going back and fucking feeding some animals that just fed you your ass, their own asses. That's the magic. That's the secret sauce. Black Silver wrote in and said, I'd go out to the garage, listen to that sweet, scratchy hum as I press the power button on my little 19-inch CRT TV, press the power button on my NES with confidence because this cartridge hasn't been changed in a long time. Crack open a bottle of beer and spend the next few hours sipping beer while grinding away at Dragon Warrior. Great times. That's a great Friday night. And Navigant wrote in and said, I'm going to have to chime in on this one. 6-year-old me was lucky enough to get an NES for Christmas in the 80s. Included with the NES was a copy of Dragon Warrior, which blew my impressionable mind. It was simple to learn, and the exploration and discoveries were incredible to a kid just learning how to play video games. I kept a logbook with my dad so we could keep track of the dungeons, important dialogue, hints, etc., and I eventually finished it after months of playing. It always felt like an accomplishment and started a lifelong hobby of gaming. Fast forward to this Christmas, my amazing girlfriend bought me a Hyperkin SNES/NES console to play my old favorites, and this was the first NES game I slotted into it, and it's still awesome 30 years later. I fucking love it. I love that so many of you love this stupid game just as much as me. We got so many comments about a game with practically no meat on the bone whatsoever. Let's fucking do it. I love it. My guest David Ray and I are going to look back at Dragon Warrior from the NES. I'm going to cue up that music I love so much. And when it stops, we're going to look back at the debut of the Dragon Quest series and one of my favorite JRPGs of all time, Dragon Warrior, which originally released in North America on the NES in August of 1989. Enjoy the podcast, everybody. The podcast. Let's go. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. Everyone that listens to this podcast knows about our illustrious CEO, my dog Molly. But the other silent partner behind the scenes is my wife. And let me tell you, my friends, a 17-year relationship with another person that has to talk to and live with you is a lot harder to maintain than one with a dog. We've had our ups and downs, and as you all know, a relationship isn't all sunshine and rainbows. They can be a lot of work. You get out what you put in when it comes to relationships, and talking to a therapist can be a fantastic way to put in some work. They can help you work through your issues, learn to communicate better, and even just provide you with an ear to bend when you need it. I've talked to my therapist about my relationships, especially when it came to my stand-up comedy career and how much I was away from home, and they helped me work on ways to keep my relationship strong even when I was out on the road. It turned out our relationship was actually better when I was out on the road, but that's a story for another day. And I know, right? Therapy. Who has the time these days? BetterHelp hears you, and they're making it easy. Fill out a quick form online, and they'll match you up with a therapist that suits your needs and that'll work around your schedule. You pick the meet times, and you can get your therapy fix from anywhere, over video, phone, or just chat. Become your own soulmate, whether you're looking for one or not. Visit BetterHelp.com/rememberthegame today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/rememberthegame. Okay, so joining me via the blank phone this week is a returning guest to the show, a very good friend of mine, the host, or I guess co-host, of the Quantum Kick Flick I'm not editing this out. We're leaving this all in. That's what you get here at Remember the Game. You get the blooper reels. Take two. All right, joining me via the blank phone this week is a very good guest of mine, returning guest of the show, co-host of the Quantum Kickflip podcast. Nailed it. The gentleman of Remember the Game, my buddy David Ray. How's it hanging, man? I nailed it that time.
Well, I mean, sort of like, I'm not really a co-host. I'm like a cast member, I think would be a good way.
Well, damn it. Okay, hang on. Take three. Okay, joining me via the blank phone this week. No.
We get it, yeah.
Yeah, we'll nail it. We'll get into we'll plug your show at the end. But
yeah.
I haven't talked, I mean, I guess I just talked to you for like 20 minutes, but I haven't talked to you on the podcast for a while. How's it going, buddy?
Yeah, I'm doing pretty well. Yeah, as we'll get into later, we're coming towards the end of the first season of our podcast, and so I'm very excited. Getting ready for the Fringe Festival here in Edmonton, so it's life is slowly returning to normal, and I enjoy that.
It's exciting, right? Like I mean, it snowed last night, so it's friggin' winter again. But like, it's kind of spring, and like festivals are coming back, and we're allowed to go outside again, and like. So, like, what better way to celebrate being able to go outside again than to sit indoors and talk about a 35-year-old video game? That's the way to celebrate it. So we're talking, as you probably know, everybody, from the intro, the music, the title of the episode, all that stuff. We're talking Dragon Warrior. I'm going to refer to it as Dragon Warrior, despite the fact that it is technically the first Dragon Quest game, and maybe some people know it that way, because growing up, I played this on the NES, and I only knew of it as Dragon Warrior. Truthfully, I was like in my 20s before I found out that this was actually the first game in the Dragon Quest series. And before everyone yells at me, I have still never played another game in the Dragon Quest series outside of this one. This is the only one that I've played. So I'm sure there's at least 2 nerds that are getting mad and getting ready to send me hate letters right now. But this is the only one that I have ever played. So I won't be referencing anything else in this series. So, David, I'll turn the floor to you here. I know you just played this for the first time, but do you know anything about the Dragon Quest series? Are you more experienced than me?
I maybe only slightly. I think I played. I think it was Final or Final. Oh boy!
See, here
that tells you where my
here
brain
they
goes.
come. Here they come.
Dragon Quest X was probably like I think I played it just a little bit.
Okay.
Oh no, that's not the one either. No, I'm sorry. I got my Wikipedia page because I'm like I knew that there's a couple of things on here. I'm like I don't remember.
Yeah.
It might have been an offshoot one because I know that there's kind of like it branched at different points for into other styles. But like I feel like I played one other one down the line, but it was not a series that I was super keen on or anything.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then before anyone
I'm
gives
with
us
you.
hell.
I'm with you.
Okay, so
Yeah.
before anyone yells at us, we don't know anything else about these games. Like I always imagined Dragon Quest versus Final Fantasy being like Star Wars versus Star Trek, like the nerds just being like, well. And like the thing is like I'm gonna be honest, and like I know this is gonna rattle some people, but like this is the only Dragon Quest, Dragon Warrior game I've played. And despite its almost ridiculous simplicity, I like it better than a lot of the Final Fantasies that I've played. This is a guilty pleasure of mine. Despite the fact that I'm not a huge JRPG fan, dude, I could play this game. I could play this game for years and just never beat it. And it's just you can just put on a podcast or smoke a joint and not know what's going on and just grind to your heart's content. And that's what I love about it. It's so basic. And that's what makes it so beautiful, in my opinion. Beautiful is the word for this game. It's beautiful, in my opinion.
There's like I'm coming in on this game as like an NES expert. Like I feel like that's really my place. That's the system I grew up with.
Yeah.
And to play this one, it's very interesting. Like. I can see like why you would call it beautiful, or why people have an attachment to this game or whatever. But to me, my best way of describing it, it's like it's a museum exhibit for role-playing games that come after it. Like it feels like it hits all of your it sets up everything that comes after it.
Yeah.
Like I know when we did the Super Mario Brothers game, it's just like, oh, this sets the standard for this, or everything that comes after, you can point to this game, kind of a thing. And so Dragon Quest feels like this. The thing that stands out to me is like it has some help boxes that it tries to explain the game, but it's explaining stuff of like HP means health points and. Right. MP means like it's so basic. It's the first one, or amongst the first ones, that it has to explain what HP means, which is in everything else that comes afterwards, right?
Yeah, I'm not gonna sit here and like. Because you all know, anyone that listens, I mean, if this is your first episode of Remember the Game, buckle in, because this might make you go insane. Because, like, I don't know anything about video games. I'm certainly not going to sit here and pretend to be like a gaming historian. I don't know if this is the first JRPG. My understanding is that this is one of the first JRPGs, at least on a console. And
it's very clear. It's very clearly so. Yeah.
And that's what I love about it. Because you're right. This like Super Mario Brothers, like. Kind of set the table for platformers and console platformers. I guess the platformers in general. And you were my guest when we did the Shining Force episode, which I look at as kind of like it's not baby's first tactical RPG, but it's like because it's not an easy game, but it's a very basic, simple tactical. Like it's very bare bones tactical RPG, and that's how I feel about this one. Like this is like. As bare bones. If you've never played this game, like this is as bare bones as a JRPG gets. You get one character, You can't name him. The story
Yeah.
is a 2 out of 10 at best. You basically just go from town to town, and every time you
Trying
find
to
a new
rescue the
town,
princess.
yes, you have to rescue the princess from a dragon, and it's like almost like a spoof on RPGs in that sense. And like you
Yeah.
literally just go from town to town, and every time you get to a new town, you just walk around the outskirts of that town fighting enemies until you earn enough money to buy the new armor and weapon, and then you move on to the next town. And that's all it is.
Yeah.
And I
There's
love it.
barely there's barely like a story in amongst people. Like they give you some basic hints
Yeah.
about what to do. Yeah, like a lot of the map is tiny. Like the overworld map is tiny. It
Yeah.
feels like.
But you know what?
Uh,
Like that map is so blatantly, without actually seeing it. Like you can kind of see it because sometimes they'll make like a wall of mountains with like a river with like one bridge going across it. And what they're basically telling you is like these are 2 different quadrants. Once you cross that river, all bets are off.
Yeah.
The enemies are going to level up. And that's a mistake that every player that plays this game makes. Is you're like, well, these enemies are too easy. I'm going to walk over here. And then you walk into an enemy that you've never seen before. You get massacred and you lose all the work that you've done. Like, oh my God. But I love it like that because you're right. The overworld is not big. And I like that. I really, I love it actually. Like,
yeah, like it does kind of give you a sense of like this game is contained in this whole map and it feels crossable, which also makes it a little bit easier to some of the more pernicious kind of aspects of the game are mitigated because of the fact you can see how big the map is. You know how like, oh, okay, well, I just know I need to get over there. It's not that far. Because of all the random encounters, which I'll get. Like, I have some complaints about this game, and there are certain things that I like. I kind of wish were back in games a little bit more.
Yeah.
But like this game is so basic that it goes out of its way to explain how keys work. Like it explains how you use a key once and that's it. It's a magic key, and it opens any lock, but then the key is gone. Like they made an in-world justification of what's happening.
Yeah.
It's like I feel like I've played games all my life where keys are just kind of a resource that it's so basic and fundamental to it that you never think of it again. But this one, like, no, it makes sense.
Yeah.
Don't worry.
But like, there's something about it because like it's just. Like I've notoriously talked about how like I play JRPGs, but they're not my wheelhouse. Like they're not my ace in the hole. They're not my go-to genre. But like, I played the original Final Fantasy a couple years ago for this podcast, and I played it on the NES. Like I played old school Final Fantasy. And
really?
And it was fun. You know, it showed its age, but it was I enjoyed it. But like in the original Final Fantasy, and like listen. I know we're talking Dragon Warrior, but it's like these 2 series will be compared to each other forever. Like the Dragon Quest and Final Fantasy are always going to be the, Sonic and Knuckles of RPG or whatever you want to say. Like Sonic and Mario, for example. Like they're always going to be the two main ones. The original Final Fantasy, you have a party of 4 characters and you could pick from different classes and those characters all have different abilities and blah, 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 blah. Much bigger overworld, stuff like that. This is like 1 character, 1 class. He's just a knight with some magic spells. It is as bare bones as it gets. And I really do. I know I've called it beautiful, but like as someone that finds big, complex RPGs a little bit intimidating, I tried playing Suikoden and had to stop. Not that it's a bad game, but I was like, I'm not good enough at RPGs to play this. Like I'm overwhelmed by this. I was playing this game and I've played this game since I was a kid. And there's just something about how there's like a really stupid example. This is like a plain peanut butter sandwich. This game is literally just 2 pieces of bread with peanut butter in between. There's no jelly. There's no like chips on the side. You don't get a glass of milk. This is just the most basic plain sandwich you could have. And sometimes it's nice to just enjoy a plain peanut butter sandwich. Like you don't have to think when you play this game at all. The only thing you have to think about, in my opinion, for the most part, when you play this game is how far away from the town you're at are you willing to risk going?
Yes.
Because the further you walk away, the further you have to walk back and the more susceptible you are to an untimely death.
Yeah.
Oh God. And
And and it's reflected in all the different parts too, because like, okay, so you want to go into the tougher part. Now you can go back to a town that is near it, that is located in the more difficult monster area, instead of going all the way back to the first town, which is dead center of the map.
yeah,
But of course, to go to the inn where you can heal and all that kind of thing, everything costs way more.
yeah.
Where like so you have to. There's a little bit of a resource management thing that happens in it, um, because unlike some systems or some games, this like you really got to pay attention to money. I don't. I feel for most of it, you don't. I never felt like I had an abundance of money. Like I
No.
had enough money to get the next thing I needed to get. Like, oh, my new armor, my new weapon, my whatever. And then I would be right back to, okay, I don't have a lot of money again.
Yeah.
I have to build this back up.
This game is almost like like kids should have to play this game to teach them about like managing their allowance. Because like you go out and grind gold and then say that because like really the game, like we'll get into some of the other facets of the game and some of the enemies and stuff, but like at its bare bones is like, yeah, you start out in the castle at the beginning of the game, the village, whatever, the castle village, and you fight the basic enemies around it till you run out of health, then you walk back, heal, and you do it and grind gold until you have enough gold to buy the best weapon and armor you can. And then eventually you gotta like, all right, we're going to go for broke. And you try to hike to the next town. And once you're there, you're golden because now you can heal and save and buy your new equipment and stuff like that. But like, just to use round numbers, say the next piece of armor and the next weapon you want to buy combined are worth 300 gold. And staying at the inn is 15 gold. And you come back to town and you're like, oh man, I have 205 gold. So you're like, I could stay at the inn, but then I don't have enough to get the new armor. If I buy the new armor now, have I got enough health with that armor that I could go out and fight enough to earn enough money to go back to the gold? It's like being a kid and being like, you have a $5 allowance. You could get yourself a chocolate bar, but now you don't have enough to buy that comic book too. And it like, I know that's really dumbing it down, but like, I love that mechanic. I don't know what it is about it, man. Like I'm smiling like a little idiot just sitting here talking about this stupid basic crappy RPG because I'm like, I feel like this RPG is for me. They're like, you can't get confused in this one, Adam. You can't like, I'm playing Final Fantasy Tactics right now and I can't tell you how terrified I am that I'm going to get to the end of the game and find out I did all my builds wrong and I'm screwed. And in this game, they're like, don't worry about it. We got your builds. Just manage your gold and you'll be fine. It's so
you have
perfect.
one guy. There's nothing to manage. Yeah.
But you're right. You go back to like you're always out of money in this game. Like 9/10 of this game is about saving your gold to buy the new equipment. And my God, do you feel the difference when you buy that new equipment?
Yeah. Like, yeah. It's immediate. Well, each step up of like monsters is noticeable. Like it's. Because the monsters don't scale. Like this is where like I was going back with this game, why I'm kind of like calling it like a museum exhibit for JRPGs. Because while we were talking here, I did look it up. This came out 1 year before Final Fantasy did.
Right.
And as you're mentioning, it did seem like Final Fantasy looked at Dragon Quest and like, this is what we needed to do to improve on this style of game.
Yeah.
And obviously, there's both of those games are clearly inspired by, at least in part, by Dungeons and Dragons, because that would have been out for like about a decade before this.
Sure.
But this game really does take the basic approach to it, because with multiple characters on your team, suddenly resource management looks way different. Right now it might be possible to like heal up via one of your healers in your group. In this, you don't have that kind of option. You're just the basic warrior type, so you know that you can't really heal up too much. You can only take so many potions. This is one of the things I actually really liked about this game. You can't carry a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
You have, you can only carry so many torches and like, medical herbs or whatever it was called.
Yeah.
So like you can't just go on forever. You do eventually have to come back and go to the store and do all that kind of thing.
It's as much resource management as it is anything. Like when you first unlock like the cure spell and you have enough magic points to use it one time,
yeah,
it's like, this is super exciting because you're like, as soon as I start running out of HP, I don't have to run back to town and go through the process of saving and everything. You're like, I can heal once, but you're like, I have one shot at this. So you want to let your HP get as low as possible before you cash it in, but you also don't want to risk like getting surprised by something and getting killed. And then like you said, you can't.
And it beats you on the initiative or whatever. Like it goes first and it's like, oh, well, that's it. I'm done.
Yeah,
you know?
It's a very risk and reward game. And I love that mechanic of it. Like I really can't get over how, like, I think, because, like, okay, I wanted to ask you because, like, I played this on the NES, like, as a kid. I used to rent this game all the time. I didn't beat it until I was an adult and I used to walk through. But I used to rent it as a kid, and I would, like, just sit there like an idiot and just, I didn't even realize, like, I had already played Final Fantasy II on the Super Nintendo before I would get my hands on this game. And then I would pick this game up, and I would just, like, love the simplicity of it and just grind away and just have fun with it. You played the Switch version?
Yeah.
I don't know what all the differences were, but, like, so I'll ask you then, like, I guess this is something we could talk about toward the end of the show, but I'm interested as someone who's a much more much more into RPGs and Dungeons and Dragons and this kind of game than I am. Like, is it too basic today? Like, did you think it's like, would you think it's boring for someone today?
Yeah, like I'm even trying to think of this game really is Final Fantasy for kids, for children, because there's not this would be I could see this opening up some kid's mind, like just like how Shining Force opened up my mind to Dungeons and Dragons and fantasy and all that kind of stuff. I can see this game being a similar kind of a thing, but it is very basic, and it is the more annoying qualities of it is that it is very reliant on grinding. Like you cannot not grind.
No.
Because the math is just not there to just like, oh, straight shot it to the next town, get your armor, straight shot it to the dungeon, get the thing, come back to the town. Like, you have to kind of do multiple trips attempting the dungeon, because the dungeon's like a maze. And you only have a limited, you don't see very much. You need your torch to kind of like light up a little bit more of the maze.
Yeah.
But you don't, it's difficult to get a sense of the layout unless you go through it and figure out the maze, and you have to memorize the maze, especially once you run out of torches and hit points. And I was like, okay, I got to start, walking my way out so I don't die before, and lose all my stuff.
Yeah. And there's no, like, if this isn't Final Fantasy where, like, you have tents where you can leave the cave, use a tent, heal up, save, and go back in. Like, this game is very much like when you set out from the town and you go to take on the next dungeon or whatever. Like, it's one thing to be walking around the town grinding, but when you set out for that dungeon, you have, like you mentioned already, like, you have a very finite amount of resources, and when they run out, like, it becomes like, not only do you need to have enough to get into the dungeon, but you'll get about halfway through that dungeon and you have to make a decision, like, have I got enough to get back to town? Because if I don't, there's no saving unless you're playing it somewhere where you have save states or something. Like, do I have enough to get back to like, you have to leave yourself enough to, like, do everything in reverse to get out of there too. And it can really, really suck, man. Like, that's the intimidating part of this game. It's all grinding. That's the whole game, is grinding. The whole game is grinding.
You're talking about save states. Now, save states I've seen help in so many games. I don't know if save states is going to help you too much, aside from, like, am I at the end of this dungeon or not?
Right.
Like, that's about it. Because I was doing a dungeon and I'm like, oh, I think you kind of get the sense that it's a giant square, right? So, okay, I've seen this far north wall. I've seen the far east wall. I kind of know how big it is.
Sure.
And then I was going through it, and then you get to the end, it's like, oh, there's a stairs that go down, and there's another floor. And it's like, oh, I have to bail immediately. There's no point, because I do not have... is you're talking about like tents and all that kind of thing. Another major thing maybe comes later on. Like I did not finish this game. I played a decent amount of it, but I like regaining magic points is pretty difficult. Do they have like ethers or anything like that later on in the game?
No, magic points are worth their weight in gold. Like,
Yeah.
like they're valuable. And you're right, dude. Save states, like, you can so easily soft lock yourself in this game.
Yeah.
And like, and you know what? Now that I think about it, maybe that's why the save system works like it does, at least in the original version, where like you
Yeah.
have to get back to town to save. It
Yes.
won't let you save in a dungeon because you're right. You could get to those stairs like you mentioned and be like, oh no, there's a second floor. So then you save, you use your save state and you're like, well, at least now if I die, I die. But if you don't have enough resources to get out of that dungeon and get back to town,
It
the
doesn't
save
matter.
state
It
is
doesn't
worthless. It's
Yeah.
worthless. And like, you can't bank on just running away from every encounter you run into in this game because it doesn't let you run away very often. Like, you get killed a lot in this game. A lot. And everyone that plays this game has multiple times will walk into a new era accidentally, run into a new enemy they've never seen and get fed their lunch and lose like an hour of progress. Everybody. And it sucks.
Now, this is something I gotta ask you because I think I know the answer, and I'm gonna say this, and then you can confirm or not whether or not this is true.
Sure.
Is it the case on the old NES version? Because I played on Switch.
Yeah.
Because you can kind of bail out of the game. It doesn't, and it kind of like resumes where you left off. Was it in the old game where like, oh, you know, you're knee deep into the dungeon already, and then your mom calls you for supper, and you're like, oh no, I gotta save. And then, do you, in order to save the game and turn off the machine, do you have to just go all the way back out, all the way back to that initial town to save?
If I remember correctly, yeah, you have to be like, you have to go to like the town to save. So like, if you wanted to save this game, like in the like, this was one of those classic like turn the TV off, cover the red light, and hope that your palm and your parents don't notice type thing. Maybe I'm wrong because I haven't played this in quite a while, but I'm 90% sure that you have to walk back and save. So.
Yeah, because otherwise, why wouldn't you just do the thing where you shut? Okay, yeah, that's obvious. That's obviously the way it is. Could you imagine though? That's the worst.
Oh yeah, dude.
That would.
And like,
oh man.
Like, and again, like, not that I like this is not a gaming historian podcast, but my understanding is that the Japanese version didn't even have saves. Like, it only had like passwords. So if you wanted to save, it was like you had to get somewhere to. Oh my god. Yeah, it says here you have to talk to a king to save. So if you're in a dungeon, tough cheese. Like there's no saving. Yeah. So it like this game's like, to me, if I'm like, we'll get more into like, because I want to get into the combat, I want to get into the graphics, I want to get into all that. But like, if you've never played this before and you decide to play, because again, I can't speak to like the newer versions. Like obviously on a Switch, you could put it to sleep anytime you want. That's one of the great things about a Switch, dude. The Switch is like the greatest place to play RPGs ever. I love the Switch for RPGs. But like, if you're playing this on the original NES, if you're playing the old school version, like block out a chunk of time for this game and expect there to be nothing but grinding. This is the most ideal listen to a podcast or watch a movie while you play a video game ever. Because like there's no story to talk about. It's literally just walking around a town fighting the same 4 or 5 enemies until you have enough money to save or to buy equipment, or you go back to town to recharge and save. Like there's nothing, you don't have to worry about like a cutscene popping up or like a villain popping in, and there's none of that. It's just walk around and random encounter. That's all it is.
See, and all of these things, like it has all the aspects of, you know, if you're sitting down to design the first RPG on a video game system, it does all the traps that in later video games they address. Because for instance, like monster scaling, like the monsters scaling alongside of you, so that they're always they're kind of a challenge for longer,
right?
But they're also not as deadly as soon. Like, you know what I mean? Like there's not this weird like huge step up between sections. There's a little bit of a transition phase.
Yeah.
but like there's the aspect that this is very grindy. Like you cannot not grind. You have to.
Yeah.
There's the aspect that you just have the one character with one character's set of you have like three options. There's no strategy to this game even. It is just, as I said, resource management, but it's not like, oh well, you do this and then you set up that and then whatever. You need multiple characters to do that, which is why Final Fantasy coming later, where you have like different abilities and you have to decide who's going to use their magic points when, and there's a little bit layer of that's when strategy comes in. This one is just guessing about like, do I have enough resource, which I think is interesting. This is why it stands out to me. This is one of the things that I think I would love to see in more games, is the idea of you can only take so much with you, as opposed to Final Fantasy games where you could just have 200 items.
Yeah, 99 potions and stuff like
an
that.
Out of control inventory. Like in this, it's just like, no, you're going to take things that you are going to use. You're not just going to have an arbitrary amount of torches or potions. You have to decide how you're going to set up and go into this next dive.
Yeah. To me, the strategy aspect, because like you're right, it's like, to me, where the strategy comes in, it's not so much in the combat. To me, the strategy in this game is your inventory management, and it's deciding like, when do you start hoofing it back to town to save. And the other thing, as you get later in the game, because you mentioned like enemies don't scale, but there's clearly like tiers of enemies. Like there's like, you're around your basic castle and you're fighting like the slimes and the little, like, I love the slime, by the way, but you fight like the basic enemies, and then you get into the next area where maybe you run, and I haven't played it in years, so I can't remember the enemies, but maybe then you run to skeletons. Then you run into, bats or whatever, and the enemies get bigger and bigger and bigger. And one of the decisions you have to make in this game is like, if you go into like area 2, like that second tier of enemy, the amount of damage they do to you and the frequency in which you need to go back to town to save goes up exponentially, but so do the rewards. So then you have to decide, do you want to play it safe and just fight the same crappy little enemies that you can kill in one hit for 2 hours, where you won't die, but it's going to take you forever? You can make that same progress in 30 minutes in the other area, but at a much bigger risk. Like, it's a very risk reward game. I think that's more of the strategy than the actual combat itself. And I love it. It's almost like gambling, and I love that aspect.
Yeah, I was going to say it's a little bit more like gambling, because that's the other thing. It's random encounters. It's not like you see it's not even like Zelda 2, where you can kind of see the monsters sort of be there.
Yeah.
This one is, you have no idea. You could fight a monster, move 3 squares, hit another monster. Like, you have no idea.
Yeah.
And that's that kind of thing. It does make it interesting, because you're right. If you could take that slow way in making sure that you don't die, but it's kind of like, if you're going to make the best use of your time, you kind of got to go into that next tier, maybe kill one of those monsters, and then huff it back, so you have a bigger chunk of change.
That's how it starts.
Maybe buy upgrades.
Yeah, that's how it starts. Is you go into that new, because eventually you have. It is like your butt clenches, man. Your ass clenches a bit when you go into a new area, because you're like, what's in here? And then when the first enemy pops up, and you're like, okay, let's see how this goes. And like, sometimes you're like, oh, that wasn't so bad. And sometimes you're like, that thing wrecked me. But you kill that one, and you're like, okay, good enough. I'm getting the hell out of this area. I'm going back to save. Then I'll come back to this area, fight one more. But then maybe you gain a level, and now you're like, well, now I can kill 2 of these things before I have to go back. And I think that's what hooks me, because like, maybe some people that are listening to this, that have listened to my podcast before, like, you hate grinding, you hate random encounters, and I especially hate random encounters. But there's something about how this entire game focuses around those things that makes it work for me. And I love that risk reward feeling of going into a new area, and like, it is, you never fight more than one enemy at a time. Yes, like, it's always 1v1, which I really like, because like, you really do learn. Dude, you hit to the point where you go into a new area, and after you've been in there for a little while, you're like, I know it's probably going to take me 3 attacks to kill this thing. and that thing is going to
Yes.
hit me for 10 damage every time it hits me type thing.
Yeah.
And so you can really plan that as you go in. And I like that mechanic a lot. It's so basic that it allows for some strategy in it in that sense, which I love this stupid game. I love it.
It does, like, yeah, it does feel like it is a different game than, Final Fantasy.
Oh, yeah.
Beyond, like, obviously it's similar themes, similar things happening, but this does feel like a different style of game, different style of approach. The fact that the flee option makes way more sense in this game. Like, I feel like flee is a viable option at points where it's just like, oh no, I am desperate. Like, that last fight really did me in. I cannot take a hit.
Yeah.
You're fleeing and you're just hoping that you are faster than the monster in the turn order, and you're just flee becomes vital at points.
Yeah, like, dude, in a normal Final Fantasy game, like, I use Final Fantasy 4 as my example because that's the one I know best, but like, I maybe run half a dozen times throughout that whole game. Like, I'm like, and it's near the end of the game, like, I don't run. In this game, like, you run all the time. It almost, going back to comparing it to gambling, like, it's almost like folding your hand at poker.
Yeah.
Like, you have to fold sometimes in this game, or it's not, it doesn't matter. There is no being a hero in this game because you don't have enough options. You, like, if you're out of healing items and you're out of magic and you've got like 10 HP left and the enemy you're fighting does 12 HP damage, there's nothing you can do. It's run or get game over. You have no other options. And some would consider that a detriment. I kind of, again, getting back, like, I think there's something kind of cool about the simplicity of it. Like, I like that idea a lot.
It does change your what your typical role-playing game decision making is.
Yeah.
I think as a curiosity about it, something like to kind of tip my my hand about how I'm going to rate this later.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think that this is a great game. Like, I feel like there's so many others. Like, where this thing is, I think this is an interesting curiosity at this point, where it's like, if you want to see like the roots of all other video game role-playing games, this is an interesting one to look at. You can see like why some of the options that don't get used as often, such as flee or run or whatever, like why they are in there originally. It's a kind of an element of its time, and you can see where it's the foundation for all the other games that come after it.
Yeah, we covered Sonic on the show 2 weeks ago, the original Sonic the Hedgehog, and I was saying that, like, to me, in my opinion, the original Sonic the Hedgehog is only really worth playing if you kind of want to see where this thing started. Like, otherwise, go to Sonic 2, skip the original. It's missing some of the mechanics you're going to want, stuff like that. And I kind of feel like that about this one, too. Like, I'll recommend this game at the end because I like it, but also because I'm like, this is kind of maybe not entirely ground zero for RPGs, but it's very close. Like, this is the early days. So if you're like a gaming historian and you want to see where it started, then play this one. But don't come into this expecting like the deepest RPG experience of your life. Because you're not gonna you're not gonna
for many reasons.
Yeah.
Because it's like, since it's one of the first, it can literally go rescue the princess still, and it's like, it's still kind of interesting. That's all I need.
Yeah. And that's where I wanted to get into, because like we've talked about the combat and stuff, but like, I mean, the story is almost non-existent in this game. What I wanted to say is like, I don't know if I could have beat this game without a walkthrough. Because it really is very cryptic in where you have to go. Yes. And some of the dungeons and the temples and the caves and stuff you go into. Oh, yeah, I meant to tell you, later in the game, you do get a spell that is like a permanent torch. which is like a
Yes,
godsend.
glow.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Like it's a godsend. But like some of those temples and stuff like that, like they are mazes, and you've got to like you're on this giant overworld, and you've got to figure out like, oh, I have to go get like this note or whatever, and then I've got to take this note over here. Like,
Yeah.
this game will not hold your hand. It'll just expect you to walk around aimlessly until you figure out where you're supposed to go.
Yeah,
Um,
because whereas like some games, Zelda, the puzzles are like inherent to the room or whatever. You have to solve the puzzle for this one room,
Right.
or maybe a dungeon wide puzzle. Final Fantasy sometimes has puzzles, but it's usually contained to an area. This puzzle is like the whole game map wide.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
you don't know if it's like you need something from this little area or from this area, or like where in it, or you need to talk to this person. The whole thing is a puzzle, which another reason why like this game is maybe not the best to play is like, oh, this is going to be a fun experience or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, not to be a gaming historian, but like I very rarely do I talk about like the history of games and stuff like that. But like this game sold like shit in North America. And so
Yeah.
they ended up giving it away to people that subscribe to Nintendo Power, and they included a walkthrough with it. And that was like, and it's crazy because it makes me wonder, had they not done that, would this series have stuck in North America? Like, I wonder, because like that's what really helped it take off, was people like them being like, hey, subscribe to our magazine. It's cheaper than buying the game, and we'll send you a walkthrough, and we'll send you this game to play. And then it suddenly makes a lot more sense. And I can imagine, like, if you're sitting there with a walkthrough, like when I finally beat this game for the first time, I used a walkthrough, and I was like, oh, and I don't even think it's because the thing is, dude, like, and that's where, like, I usually hate using a walkthrough, but in this game, it kind of works because you still have to do the grinding and make the decisions on the risk reward part yourself.
Yeah.
That walkthrough will just tell you, like, just FYI, the next dungeon you have to go to is down to the left and a little bit to the east type thing. Like, which will help you just from walking around. Like, because I think without a walkthrough, quite frankly, I think most people would just get frustrated and be like, this is stupid. I'm just walking around blind. Like, this isn't fun. You know what I mean?
Yeah, because I'm grinding in addition to not knowing where to go. So I'm just trying to find my way around, and I get hit by random encounter. Like, that's not those two things in combination. If you know where to go, like I'm thinking like a Pokemon game where it's like, I know where I'm headed.
Right.
Yeah, there's going to be random encounters, but at least I know where I'm going. It's not a mystery in a Pokemon game.
Right.
Whereas in this, it's like, I hope it's this way because I'm going to have to fight like 30 things.
Yeah.
If I'm going to set out in this direction.
And if you walk the wrong way, you end up running into an enemy that'll kill you in one hit. And you're just like, oh, man, like, there goes 45 minutes of grinding because I accidentally turned the wrong way around a mountain and walked into a new area and got massacred. Like, I'll sit here right now and just straight up say, play this with a walkthrough. Like, you'll enjoy it better. Like, you don't have to worry about having any story spoiled for you. It'll just keep you on the right path.
Yeah, well, and to further say that, if you're trying to explore like all the places that you have been, seemingly doesn't have the answer in it. Although the answer might be you needed to talk to this person. You're like, well, maybe it's in the tougher area, and so you start wandering into this place that you're ill-equipped for, and then suddenly it gets out of hand.
Yeah,
and turns out you finally get to the end of that dungeon. It's like, no, this is actually not the place where you're supposed to be. You needed to.
Yeah.
Like, wow. Okay.
Yeah, like the only thing this game is missing is the like wah wah because you walk into the wrong place and they're like, ah, nice try. Like, save always, and yeah, use a walkthrough because like the game does not help you at all.
Here's a question.
Shoot.
If it had the option to have like Navi, from like Legend of Zelda, like Ocarina, where it's just like, look, it will help you. It will tell you where to go, but you do have to hear that stupid voice come up and, hey!
Yeah.
Yeah.
Would I use
that would
it?
add another level of challenge to the whole game.
You know what? I would mute the game and just find a walkthrough. I'd be like, Navi, I'll take my chances. I'll take my
Okay.
chances. I hate you. I hate that
No,
fairy
that-
so much. Oh, dude, you know what else
That
I
was an
forgot?
aside for sure.
Sorry, you know what else I forgot? We've been talking about dying all the time. Oh my
Yeah.
God. When you die, you lose half of your gold.
Yeah. Oh, that exists in some other games too. But yeah, this is
It's
This is-
such a
it's a
massive
brutal loss.
punishment in this game because the whole game is about getting gold. Like,
gold is fundamental. Yeah, and losing half your gold is. Oh, I lost the last hour of progress.
yeah. Oh my God,
Yeah.
I totally forgot that. But you know what though? On
And
that
it
note
forces-
though, when I go
it
back
forces- Oh, sorry.
when I go back to town and I spend all my money, like say I'm done, like I bought new armor and I healed or whatever, and I have like 20 gold left. I'll go out and like I'm like, all right, I am gonna push my limits here because I'm like I have nothing to lose if I die. I don't really give a crap. Like I'll go out and swing for the fences. But I totally forgot about that. Like this game, I like this. I should not like this game. Like, this is the type of stuff that I bitch about with RPGs all the time. I should hate this fucking game. There's just something. I guess it's the nostalgia's a powerful drug. Maybe that's what it is. Maybe that's the only reason I fucking like it. Because that's bullshit. You don't, like, you could be out there, dude, you need to save up 2,000 gold to buy that new gold armor, and you're at, like, 1980, but then you accidentally trigger one more fight, die, and you just lost 1,000 gold. Or you can reload your save where you were at 1,000 gold. And it's like, what a load of shit. What a terrible, I totally forgot about that. That's going to cost it points when we score this game. What a load of shit. That fucking gold penalty is. Suck my ass. Fuck you. That is not fair. And I'm sorry. I'm done. Fucking garbage. Fuck.
Well, I think what's also interesting because, like, I'm thinking about the big differences between this and the multi. Like, the thing that I think changes it is like one person versus having a team of 3 that goes out into the field.
Right.
Is just like. Yeah, if you go down, that's it. You lost all that stuff. And I feel that's why I think I could see why you would enjoy this because you don't have to consider a pile of dynamics.
Yeah.
Whereas with a team of 3, you're like, you feel like you should be able to figure out or you're supposed to be able to figure out how to manage it with 3 people.
Right.
Between like, okay, well, you should be using this character this way and this character that way. Theoretically, I should be, and when you die in those games, you feel like kind of stupid.
Yeah.
In this, since it's just one character, the decisions are way easier to make, or the calculations are way easier.
Yeah.
So it is. That's why it's like I think this game would be great for kids
Sure.
who are maybe just getting into this stuff and might stream along to something better.
Yeah.
So before you can start going into the games with multiple characters,
And-
more things going on, more dynamics.
Yeah, and on that note, like the thing I hate the most about RPGs as a whole is every time I get to a new town and if I have a party of like 5 people or whatever, like that. This is why, as great as Final Fantasy VI is, I'll never like it more than Final Fantasy IV. And the reason for that is because I hate having to equip a dozen people. Like I hate dealing with everyone's equipment. I hate that part in any RPG. Even some of my favorite RPGs of all time. The reason I like Super Mario RPG so much is because everybody has 2 items and there's only 5 characters to worry about. It's their weapon and their armor and I'm done. Whereas like I hate having to deal with everyone's loadouts. Every time I get into a town, I'm like, here comes 20 minutes of boring inventory management and selling stuff and buying stuff and that's what I like about this game is you get into town and it's basically like there might be 2 or 3 weapon and item weapon and armor options, and clearly the more expensive they are, the better they are. How much do you want to grind? And I like that. I think that's really, I kind of never thought of it until you said it. I think that's what tickles my fancy with this game is the lack of inventory management that I hate having to do so much in other games.
Because I was talking about resource management. This game definitely has resource management, which is your hit points, your magic points, your gold, and like inventory slots, which I think is huge too. Because the thing is, with some games with huge inventories, or like the idea of like, this sword is good against these kind of enemies.
Yeah.
But you better have your other sword in case you run into those kind of enemies.
Yeah.
And so it's just, you just have, each character has half a dozen weapons that you're kind of maintaining. This one is just like, look, there's no point in keeping your old sword. So sell it so you
Yeah,
can get the new
exactly.
one.
You never need to carry
So-
more than one. Yeah. Oh,
because it literally does not help you, and you can only carry like it's like 8 items or whatever.
yeah.
And I think that's the thing I would love to see more. As I said earlier, just force me to manage these limited amount of item slots. That's make me decide what is more valuable, as opposed to like, I might need this later.
Yeah.
No. You need to
Dude,
take stuff. You will need everything. You will need every slot.
every Final Fantasy game I've ever played, like when I start getting a little bit of money, I always buy like 5 gold needles, 5 maiden's kisses, and I never use those things ever. But I always buy them like, oh, just in case, and then I never fucking need them. But you're right, you can be so frivolous because you've got this magical, I don't know, backpack or something that you can fill with 3 trillion items. It all comes down to the simplicity of this game, and that's what I like about it. The other thing I wanted to touch on before we get to scoring this thing, and now you play the Switch version, and I've looked at pictures of the Switch version, and it looks nice. I just wanted to say the NES version of this game, it looks kind of, I mean, obviously it's very primitive. It's a mid-'80s NES game. The overworld and all that looks very primitive, but you know what I think looks phenomenal in this game is when you trigger a battle and it goes to that first person view and there's just that one enemy looking at you standing in whatever background you're looking in. I think frankly that's a little ahead of its time. Like I think that looks I think it really adds a bit of immersion. Is you're the one hero and you just came across an enemy and you're looking right at the slime or the skeleton or whatever.
It's a POV shot.
Yeah,
kind of thing.
I'm a big fan of that art style. Like, I think of Earthbound mostly when I think of that kind of art style, but to do it in a game that's like, 10, 15 years before Earthbound on the NES, and it actually looks like I'm looking at a picture on the Wikipedia page right now of you battling a blue slime. And it actually I'm like, dude, for like a mid-'80s NES game, this looks really good. Like I really like that art a lot.
That was a great design choice because like as I've been playing on the Switch, I can tell where they've updated some graphics and what are kind of like, oh, this is probably how it was. In certain sprites, like a lot of the character sprites are kind of redone for the Switch. You can kind of tell because they're not as blocky. But then the background is completely blocky, like very pixelated.
Sure.
And but yeah, that POV shot of the monster seen in front of you, adding like where you can see the expressions and like the details in it, it's really taking that weakness of the NES and finding a way around it. Just like how Punch Out does that.
Yeah.
The whole thing why Punch Out has such great characters and like makes you attached to them is you can see all the detailing on them by making them super huge, and they just take up your whole field of vision, so you can kind of see, get attached to them. If they were just like the sprites that you would see, say, in Final Fantasy games, where it's just like they're tiny little things and you can kind of like tell what they are, but they do look like a collection of pixels. There's something lost there. That I do see why that was a great choice for them to make, and giving the game more personality.
Especially because, again, going back to the fact that it's you're a one character party. It really this might be a stretch of a comparison, but like in a slight way, it's almost like an NES Skyrim. Like you're out there just by yourself and then you come across these enemies and it really feels like it's you versus that one enemy. You're not controlling a team that you're not like when I play like like even the original Final Fantasy, like you don't feel like you're one of those 4 characters. You feel like you're just like the overseer controlling these 4 characters against those guys. Yeah. In Dragon Warrior, it feels like, oh, it's me versus this slime or it's me versus this skeleton. And it feels like the stakes are higher almost, which I really like. And on that note, just quickly, I just want to shout out like, dude, the slime in Dragon Warrior, Dragon Quest, whatever, maybe... Is that the RPG equivalent of the Goomba as far as like legacy and like just iconic status. Like, I have such a hard on for the slime in Dragon Quest. I love I just love that little blue slime. He looks like a Hershey's Kiss, but with that big smile on his face. I love the slime enemies. I love them so much. I just wanted to shout them out. Like, I wish there was a slime amiibo. I would buy a slime amiibo if there was one.
I can believe that. Yeah.
They're awesome.
I think most of the monsters in this game are very detailed and look great.
They look really good.
The skeletons look like classic D&D skeletons.
Yeah.
What you would picture in your brain of like, if I'm going to fight an animated skeleton, this is what it looks like.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think this game has that ability to have to stand out.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking if they did not have that, this game would just feel a little bit you're like separated from it a bit more.
Yeah.
Like it gives it humanity to a certain degree.
Yeah, agreed. Mm-hmm. I can't believe we got 52 minutes out of this game. Like, considering that there's not a lot to talk about in this game.
Dude, we did Duck Hunt for like an hour.
That's true. Yeah, we did. We did do Duck Hunt for like an hour. I shouldn't like this game. I don't know why I like this game so much.
I'm surprised you do, actually.
I am too, but I don't know what it is about it. I have such a soft spot in my heart for this game. I almost don't want to play any other Dragon Quest game. I almost want to just be like, no, this is my one, and it's the best one, and the rest of them suck. And I know they don't yell at me, but I just really, really love this game for some reason. I don't know why. Everything about it should piss me off, but I love this stupid game.
I bet there's going to be people that recommend you should give this one a try or something like that. But from what I can recall playing the offshoot of it is a lot more. They take on some more of the aspects that you see in Final Fantasy over this one, for sure.
Yeah. They're from what I understand, Dragon Quest XI is like a masterpiece. Before everyone writes in telling me to play more Dragon Quest games, I don't want to play any more RPGs. I have 3 more on my plate right now as it is, and I'm RPG'd out. I don't want to play any more damn RPGs. So I don't.
They are a grind. It's such an investment to play an RPG.
It is, yeah. Okay, so then. Boy, oh boy, how the hell do we score this damn thing? I think there's 11 Dragon Quest games, isn't there? Let's go with that. There's 11 mainline Dragon Quest games. I'm going to look that up before everyone yells at me. Dragon Quest. I'm looking it up right now so that nobody gives me hell when I'm like, oh, there's 12 or whatever. Dragon Quest 1, 2, 3, 4. Yes. No, oh, damn it. Oh, no, to be announced. Dragon Quest 12. Okay, so we're going with 11. There's 11. So let's do that. David, if you were going to score the original Dragon Warrior / Dragon Quest out of 11, and this is a hard one to score in 2022, what would you score this game?
Well, like usual, I'm going to give it 2 ratings.
Yeah, no, that's good.
I think if it was playing this back when it came out, yeah, I think it's up there. I think there is something unique about this versus, Zelda, which would have been out around the same time. Even Final Fantasy that maybe comes a little bit later because the gameplay is separate.
Yeah.
That it probably is up around a 7 or an 8 if you're talking about 1986 when this thing came out.
Yeah.
It's going to be up. Right, we're out of 11.
Mm-hmm.
So like an 8 or a 9.
Okay.
An 8.5. Let's go somewhere there in the development of 9.
Okay.
And then in terms of now, I think it does go back. If you have interest in seeing the history of some of these things, if you that's interesting to you, there's the curiosity of it, the novelty of old games. I think it can, I think it's interesting. Maybe around a 6.
Sure.
But if you're wanting a cool role-playing thing, this is a 2.
Yeah. No, I get it. Yeah.
Yeah. There's many games have come after it to do better, but I did find it interesting. That's the thing. I like watching old games and I see where everything came from now.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I love it, I'm giving it a 9 out of 11 because I love it. This is like my Bart versus the Space Mutants of RPGs. I know it's not very good, but I love it. If you've never played this game and you're listening to this, you're like, I'm going to give this a shot now. I could imagine it's like a 5 or a 6. Like, it is not a great game. It's history is what it is. This is like, listen.
It's not easy to defend, but subjectively, that's really what these ratings are, right?
Exactly.
All ratings are subjective.
Like, I would tell a platformer fan that's never played Super Mario Brothers that I'm like, Super Mario Brothers is like a 9 out of 10 today. Play it, you'll love it. I can't say that about this. If you're a big JRPG fan but you've never played this game, I recommend trying it for the historian's sake. But like, you're not going to be like, oh my god, that's the greatest game I ever played. But it's so weird. I should not like this game, and I love this stupid game for some reason. So I can hear the music in my head that's probably playing, like a 9 out of 11. I love it. I love it. So David, thank you for indulging me and talking Dragon Warrior. I really appreciate it. And
no problem.
Before I cue up some music and flip it over to the outro, you stay pretty busy on your own right these days. So the information will be in the description of this podcast. But tell people where they can find more of your jabbering if they want to listen to more of your jabbering.
The best thing you can probably check out is Quantum Kickflip, which is an actual play podcast of an upcoming role-playing game called Slug Blaster. It's being developed here in Edmonton, and we got the chance to play it in advance, and we've made a whole kind of narrative podcast delving into the lives of these kids, going into other dimensions to pull off weird stunts and everything. And we're coming up on our season finale, which is going to begin on June 22nd. We're coming towards the end of wrapping up some of these storylines. And I'm really proud of it. I'm very, I've done a lot of things over the years, and I feel like to do an improvised role-playing game kind of a story is not always easy, and I think we did pretty good with it, and it's pretty funny.
Yeah.
So you can find us on Facebook and Instagram and all that kind of thing. You can go to our website, which is just quantumkickflip.com, and you can also find us on all your normal podcasting apps.
Yes. And I'll have his information in the description of this podcast. I know for a fact there are members of our community that are big fans of Quantum Kickflip. And I almost assure you it's far more professionally done than my podcast is. So I recommend checking it out.
I'm always impressed with Rob. And the thing that I'll highlight for video game players especially is Robin, he makes music for each episode. As we go into a new dimension or whatever, he makes music specifically for it. And it often sounds like the Super Nintendo version of cyberpunk music, or it sounds like it should be in a Mega Man game. And every once in a while I'll throw him a curveball where it's just like I like to throw montages at him, and I'm kind of a Rocky kind of a character. So of course I threw at him at one point Punch Out, using the Punch Out music, and I kind of sang it, and he took my mumblings and my hummings, and he was able to turn it into a song that sounded a lot like Punch Out without actually using the music, because we don't want to get in trouble. But
of course,
he
yes,
was able to manipulated it.
Only idiots use actual video game soundtracks in their podcasts and risk getting in a lot of trouble for it. Only the dumbest of the dumb. And with that said, I'm going to use that to cue up the Dragon Quest soundtrack to end this podcast. David, listen, buddy, it was great chatting with you. Thank you so much for doing this.
No problem.
That's going to do it for this week's episode. David, thank you so much for giving me a call and talking Dragon Warrior. And of course, to every single one of you nerds listening to this right now, whether this is your first episode of Remember the Game, maybe your 194th, thank you so much for the support. Thank you for taking us a chance. And thank you for making us the #1 video game podcast in Canada, as officially ranked on the fucking Apple Podcast charts. Suck it, whoever the fuck is in number 2 at the time that we were at number 1. Fuck yeah. If you like the show and you're like, this does not suck, maybe leave us a nice review on your podcast service of choice. Give us those 5 stars. I'm not sure what they do, but it's my job to ask for them. And if you're like, man, I can't get enough of this guy's voice, maybe consider supporting us on Patreon. Subscriptions start at just $2 US a month. You get 2 additional podcasts every week, every Thursday and Friday, instant access to about 200 additional ones. And then we got all kinds of other perks depending on what level you want to sign up. When you can join our Discord, where there's like 400 or 500 members, and they're really nice, and they're always getting games and video games together. Like, it's really cool. It's just a fucking great place. It's one of the last non-shitty places available on the internet. Patreon.com/rememberthegame. Plus, don't forget 5% of every Patreon pledge every month gets donated to the Stollery Children's Hospital. So you're doing some good for the kids too. I also have a P.O. box. You can find that address at rememberthegamepodcast.com. If you're interested, no big gifts. Just show me a postcard or a letter, something little. Let me know where you're listening. I'll send you one back. We'll be friends. And please don't forget to check me out on Twitch. I stream over there Tuesday nights, and then just whenever I can get on. Your best bet is to just throw me a follow. It's completely free. I don't beg you for donations or subs. You can just come hang out, see my stupid nose, and we can talk about video games. Go to twitch.tv and look for Member the Game, not Remember the Game. Member the Game. Fuck whoever has Remember, because I can't have it. And that's it. That's all your plugs. I'm going to do some shout outs and get out of here. Thank you so much for the support, everybody. We'll be back next week with Remember the Game number 195, which is going to be one of our revisited series. And if all the stars align, and by stars, I mean we get the podcast recorded this week like we're supposed to, we may or may not be looking back at a little known game called Final Fantasy VII. But that's next week. That's not today. That's next week. Thanks for listening, everybody. I'll talk to you all again later. Cheers. Goodbye. Remember the Game is brought to you by our Patreons. I could not churn out all the content I produce every week without all of your support. The following people are subscribed at our senior executive vice president level or higher at patreon.com/rememberthegame. And as such, I am contractually obligated to screw up a bunch of their names and say thank you. So a huge thank you to Makeshift, Mallow Money, Joe Buck, Sharonic, Andre, Keegs and his stupid arrow handle, James Clark, Dave McGee, DNA Gaming, Slick Rick, Doug Doran, Charlie Medeiros, Andrew Wright, Jordan, The Good Enough Gamer on YouTube, Fraser Burns, Lil Bunny Fufu 89, Angry Ticks, Dave Thompson, No One Cares, Brandon O'Brien, Aaron Lawson, Matt McLean, Nathan Tremblay, Morgan, Zane Donovan, Ryan Kinchin, Mike Maloney, Very Cool Dude, G9PSX, Raging Demon, Wolfgang Darren, Sam Wright, Andy Hudson, Chris Copland, Wolf Magic 21, Johnny CCDC, Titan 420, Zonko 504, Adam Farrer, Russell Aldridge, Jeff Bergeron, Captain N, Game Nomad Misi, Daniel, Tunable Power, Tom Danks, John Woodruff, Just a Fish, Noob Q, Super Dad Bros Podcast, Denzalo, Holmes, Zach Shepard, Ballsack Teabagger, Chris Dickin, Matthew D'Amico, Frosty Feet 492, Chris Larkin, Austin Cook, Elijah Burns, Stephen Parnell, Dakabai, Ray San Juan Tongo, Zach Coiner, DBXJ, Jameer Williams, Steve Dalk, Phil McCracken, Trav H, Mizuru, David Marcus, Phil Lencher, Ruben Elizald, Eric James, Riley Turvey, C-Spin, Thomas Smith, Nicola, Munch Makuchi, Leroy Westrich, Dark Squall, Jerry the 3D Printed Saustrich, Paul Burke, Evolva, Sean Ramos, Boston Porksword, Mad Max, Stud Still Smash, Mojo the Helper Monkey, Solid Rake, Brant Hewitt, Gabe, Dan Fusselman, Aaron Mitson, Decoy Man, John Jameson, Wyatt, the surgeon who's not a surgeon, Rowe, Tyler Nightmare, Dixon Cider, I get it, Benjamin Swiller, Creature Club, Pet My Peeve Podcast, Tristan Teen the Great, Esteban Navarro, Jim, Josh Stone, and Chris Williams. Holy fuck, that's the best one I've ever done. Thank you all so much for the support. I really, really appreciate it. Take it easy, everybody. Purple Monkey Dishwasher. That ought to hold those SOBs.